She only wanted a chance to work, to live with dignity, to be seen as more than the color of her skin. But the moment she stepped into that wealthy household, whispers turned into stares, and stares into cruelty. What they didn't know was that she carried something far greater than shame or fear. And when the unimaginable happened to the family's son, the very maid they dismissed would become the one person standing between despair and a miracle. But how could they ever accept the truth? Amara was no stranger to hard work. Every morning before sunrise, she tied her hair back, slipped on her faded shoes, and made the long walk into the city. She worked as a maid in one of the wealthiest homes in the neighborhood, a place filled with marble floors, sparkling chandeliers, and voices that rarely spoke her name with kindness. To her, it wasn't about luxury. It was about survival. Each paycheck meant food on the table for her little brother, medicine for her mother, and the hope that tomorrow might be gentler than today. But survival in that household came with a price. Whispers followed her in the hallways. Quiet laughter echoed behind her back, and subtle reminders made it clear she didn't belong. The family she served never missed an opportunity to remind her of the difference between them and her. Still, Amara carried herself with quiet strength. She swallowed the sting of their words, holding on to a dream that one day she'd rise above it all. Yet, life has a way of testing the very people who endure the most, because soon, something would happen inside that grand mansion, something so unthinkable that the very maid they dismissed and disrespected would become the only one capable of saving them. For weeks, Amara had endured the unspoken rules of the mansion. She cleaned the silverware no one would ever let her use, scrubbed the marble floors she was forbidden to walk on after hours, and carried trays of food she could never taste. Every smile she offered was met with a cold glance, or worse, laughter that wasn't meant to be hidden. But it was the children who made her job unbearable, especially Daniel, the millionaire's only son. At just 10 years old, he had already learned what his parents never bothered to disguise, that Amara's skin made her different. When he struggled to read, it was Amara who patiently helped him. When he fell and scraped his knee, it was Amara who rushed to comfort him. And yet he sneered at her kindness, repeating words he had overheard at the dinner table, words sharp enough to cut through her pride. "You're just the maid," he would mutter. Nothing more. Amara swallowed the pain in silence, not because she was weak, but because she had no choice. To lose this job meant losing the only lifeline her family had. Still, each day weighed heavier on her spirit. She prayed for strength, prayed that the walls of that mansion wouldn't crush the hope she carried. Then, one morning, everything changed. Daniel awoke screaming, clutching his eyes, unable to see. Doctors were called, specialists rushed in, but no answers came. The family spiraled into panic, their perfect world shattered in an instant. Fear turned to anger, and as desperation grew, their cruelty needed a target. They found it in Amara. "She must have done something," they whispered. "She must have brought this curse into our home." The accusations spread like wildfire, each word heavier than the last. Amara felt the walls closing in, her heart pounding as the weight of blame pressed against her chest. No proof, no reason, only suspicion, born from prejudice. She thought about leaving, about running back to the safety of her own small world, but something inside her refused. As Daniel cried out in the darkness of his blindness, Amara stayed. Not because she was welcomed, but because compassion lived where hate tried to destroy it. But the more she tried to help, the more resistance she faced. Doors slammed in her face, orders barked like commands to a prisoner, and eyes filled with disdain followed her every move. Still, she stood her ground. Because deep down, she sensed something none of them could see, that her role in Daniel's life wasn't finished. And when the night came, that his pain reached its peak, when his family turned away in despair, Amara stepped forward into the unknown. Her decision, made in that moment, would defy every insult, every whisper, and every wall that racism had built around her. But what she did next, no one in that mansion could have ever imagined. The mansion was silent that night, silent, except for Daniel's sobs echoing through the halls. His parents stood helpless, their pride and wealth powerless against the darkness that had stolen their son's sight. Every doctor had failed, every remedy dismissed. Despair hung heavy in the air, and then all eyes turned once again to Amara. She had been forbidden to touch him, forbidden to even step near his bed. But now desperation spoke louder than prejudice. "Do something," his mother hissed, though her eyes still burned with resentment. It wasn't trust. It was last resort. Amara's hands trembled as she stepped closer. She could feel every gaze pressing into her skin, every ounce of doubt suffocating her. Kneeling beside Daniel, she whispered softly, words of comfort he barely heard. Her heart pounded as she remembered her grandmother's remedies, the ones mocked as superstition by the very people who now demanded them. Slowly, carefully, she rubbed a mixture of herbs across Daniel's eyes, her fingers gentle but steady. The room held its breath. For a moment, nothing. Just silence and the sound of a child's broken breathing. The weight of failure threatened to crush her. And then Daniel gasped. I see light." His voice cracked through the stillness like thunder. The family rushed forward, disbelief etched on their faces as Daniel blinked against the faint glow returning to his vision. The impossible had begun to unfold, but instead of gratitude, the air turned sharp. Fear mixed with awe. Whispers filled the room, accusations wrapped in wonder. Witchcraft, luck, an accident. Anything but acknowledgement that the black maid they belittled had done what no one else could. And as Daniel's sight flickered back like the first rays of dawn, Amara realized this was more than a healing. It was a battle between truth and the walls of hate that had caged her. The question was no longer whether Daniel could see. It was whether his family ever would. Daniel's vision returned in the days that followed, slowly but unmistakably. The boy who once mocked Amara now clung to her presence, whispering thank yous he was almost too ashamed to say aloud. For him it was a miracle. For his parents, it was something far more uncomfortable, a truth they could not deny, yet could not bring themselves to fully accept. They allowed Amara to remain in the mansion, but not with honor, not with the respect she deserved. Whispers still followed her, though quieter now, weighed down by guilt. They owed her everything, and yet pride kept them silent. Amara carried the burden of that silence. She had proven her strength, her compassion, her humanity in the most undeniable way. But in a world blinded by prejudice, even miracles were not enough to erase the walls of racism. She walked each day with her head high, knowing that dignity was something no one could take, not even those who refused to see her worth. And that is where the story reaches beyond the mansion's walls. Because Amara's struggle is not just hers, it belongs to countless others whose humanity has been questioned, dismissed, or ignored. Her story asks us a question we cannot avoid. How many acts of resilience, how many sacrifices, how many undeniable truths will it take before we finally look past skin and see the soul? Racism does not always appear in headlines or violent acts. Sometimes it hides in whispers, in silence, in the refusal to acknowledge another's worth. The real question is not whether Amara's miracle changed her employers. It's whether stories like hers can change us. Will we keep looking away? Or will we finally choose to see?